Yes, Madam President. Mayor Higgins.
Present.
Madam President, Sharon Council Harris.
Present.
Councilor Nicole.
Present.
Councilperson Lorraine Johnson.
Present.
Councilor Carla Brooks.
Present.
Councilor Talia Jones Ward. Councilor Toya Monroe. Councilor Toya Monroe. Councilor roll call.
Here.
Thank you. All right.
First on the agenda tonight.
No, nothing. Solicitor? Or solicitor?
Present.
Thank you. Then our engineer.
Present.
Thank you. Then our finance director, Mr. Nichols. That concludes the roll call, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. Under old business, consideration to approve the retention of law offices of Carl Ewald, P.C. as special counsel for the restored zoning appeal and authorize the council president to execute a retainer agreement and joint representation. Joint representation. Is there a second? It's been moved and properly second. Are there any questions?
Yes. Hello, I'm present. Would you like to be present? I have questions that may be more appropriate for executive session, so we're gonna honor us with an executive session, or shall I ask the questions on the phone? You don't get an answer?
It will not be. We had an executive session on this past week. We will not have another executive session with the
All right. So, Restore filed a written request for the zoning approval in September 2020. The Borough zoning officer issued the approval letter. Restore proceeded to renovate the old bank. They're in for over $1 million on this. In October of 2021, Sharon Council Harris and several residents of the borough filed an appeal to the Borough Zoning Board for approval and claimed that this was the first time they became aware of it, regardless of all of the publications that were made in public council meetings, documented in the minutes, the newsletter, mayor's forum, Good Morning, Yeadon, Kichi Chachi, and Sharon Council in her capacity as an individual, as well as other concerned borough residents, retained Carl Ewald, the same lawyer named here, and I'm assuming paid him to represent them in a zoning hearing appeal. So in February of 2022, the zoning board issued a decision to withdraw Restore zoning approval. March of this year, Restore appealed the zoning hearing board's decision to the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas. We now have a request before us to retain Mr. Ewald as special counsel for the borough to intervene in Restore's appeal of the zoning board's decision in the Delaware County Court of Common Pleas. I believe this request will now transfer Sharon Council Harris's personal pursuit of this appeal to become the borough responsibility when the borough took no action last year to overturn Mr. Stokes' zoning approval or the issuance of the building permit and certificate of occupancy for the use that followed. I see this to be a clear conflict, not only for the borough, but for Mr. Ewald as well. I don't quite understand how Mr. Ewald is supposed to represent the borough who issued the zoning approval letter and subsequent building permit and certificate of occupancy. And at the same time, represent Sharon Council Harris as an individual and those other borough residents who want to overturn the approval, saying it was a mistake. So, Mr. Ewald publicly stated in his Mr. Ewald publicly stated in his representations of Sharon Council Harris and certain residents that the borough made a mistake in his role in presenting the borough is to defend the borough and the actions taken by the borough officials, including the zoning officer and code officers who issued the permit. Mr. Ewald's dual representation of both Sharon Council Harris and residents individually and the borough represents significant conflicts of interest. I do not believe this is a waivable conflict because there clearly are or could be competing interests between the borough and the individual residents. Also, Mr. Ewald already exhibited a predisposed bias against Restore Wellness, so he would not be permitted to provide the borough with representation. I question why the borough should become involved in this appeal to support this position that Sharon Council Harris, as an individual, has promoted. What does the borough gain from entering into this appeal, understanding that we, as a borough, were not named in this lawsuit? If the zoning approvals are withdrawn, who's going to compensate Restore for investing over $3 million into this site in reliance on the permits that the borough issued to them? Does the borough become subject to that by entering into this appeal? This makes absolutely no sense. President Council Harris must recuse herself from any discussion or vote on whether to retain Carl Ewald as special counsel for the borough. Her involvement in this discussion and vote would be a clear conflict of interest between her interests as a private citizen and her duties as president of Borough Council, and the violation of the Pennsylvania Code of Ethics for Public Officials. As such, I request that Sharon Council Harris recuse herself from any official action on this matter, including any discussion or vote. Rather than risk a conflict of interest by this appointment, what is preventing the borough solicitor from representing the borough's interests, as he is already paid to do so? Mr. Ewald has already argued on behalf of Ms. Council Harris's group of concerned citizens that the borough made a mistake in issuing these zoning approvals. Is that now the official position of council? It's not my position. Is adopting on behalf of the borough? If so, what legal liability does admitting to a mistake like that expose the borough to? Will the borough be forced to compensate the medical marijuana facility over $3 million for the money that they spent in reliance on our zoning officer's approval of the use? Can the borough afford the risk when the facility is claiming it has spent millions on the building? We have two highly capable attorneys already on board. We have absolutely no reason to hire a third. It's wasteful, irresponsible, and prejudiced. I'd like for you to recuse yourself.
I have a question as well.
Council roll call, you have the floor.
I too have great concerns. This is highly problematic. After reviewing footage of what took place on the day of the actual zoning board appeal, Mr. Ewald stated from the outset that Yeadon Borough made a mistake. So now, how is he going to effectively represent us after he already said we made a mistake? If the court of common pleas find that we made a mistake, that Mr. Ewald said, we're going to be the one footing the bill. That's a clear conflict of interest. He can't work both sides of the fence. Mr. Iannelli is the current zoning board attorney. Mr. Iannelli should handle it. In addition, Yeadon Borough is not a named defendant. It is the zoning board. We will be very regretful if we appoint Mr. Evil as special counsel. You absolutely should recuse yourself. You testified as well in your own individual capacity, and now you want to testify in your capacity as Borough Council President. That's a conflict. You should absolutely recuse yourself.
Are there any other questions?
I have another point.
Excuse me, Councilor Johnson, you have the floor.
Could we please have the person to speak on that issue of conflict of interest?
Yes, Mr. Chris.
So a lot was brought up there, but to the very specific question of whether there's a legal, not any other kind of conflict, a legal conflict of interest. Mr. Ewald has researched this. I don't believe that there is a clear conflict of interest. I believe I've told both sides here on council that there are arguments on both sides. I do humbly fall on the side that there's not a legal conflict. The other side, in full disclosure, I believe is going to claim that there is a conflict, and a judge will decide that. But I think the broader issue is, my opinion, there's no legal conflict of interest. But to say that that is a 100%, I'm sure of that, I would say I'm 80–90% sure of it, but there's a cognizable argument on the other side, which is frequently the case in the law.
Thank you.
Can you dovetail?
Yeah, I got it.
But we gotta be able to work together.
Well, yeah, they left. I got breakdown.
I'm getting it like
Yeah,
and you
I
say
got it.
and you say nothing. You should be ashamed.
Our line of caution,
Are there any other questions?
solicitor.
Caution, I think, is a political issue that reasonable minds could fall on both sides.
Thank you.
I also have another question. It's my understanding that as a result of the illegal vote that was taken on April Fool's Day, that Mr. Ewald has already engaged on behalf of the Borough of Yeadon, and you are considering paying him retroactively for those matters?
I'm gonna call for the vote, all in
You're
favor?
made in the answer. You're gonna have to get your people here. You're gonna have to get your own people here to continue to support your illegal and your immoral actions. If you don't have your own forum,
Okay, the
make
vote,
sure that
would you call for the vote?
Get out the door, Latoya, you're calling the vote because you're still here.
Councilperson Porter.
No.
Councilperson Deaton.
You gotta be physically present. Waters can't vote. No, we can't. Resign, 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 resign. Get your people here to carry out your illegal actions. We will not.
Councilperson
gone.
Monroe.
You gotta have the physical form.
You gotta have
Physical form, not no telephone.
Councilwoman Waters cannot vote. She has
has to be present on the floor.
Yes, you
Yes, you
do.
do.
Borough business cannot be transacted over Morse code.
That's right. That's right.
Research before you open your mouth.
That'll be a first.
Madam President,
Okay, that's,
Madam President?
Go ahead, vote. Go ahead, do it. Say yes.
It's illegal.
I want it to be illegal. Say yes.
Mr.
It's on
Yeah, keep going, it's on camera.
I'd like my understanding is that there has to be 4
Present on the
councilmen
floor.
present for there to be a quorum. All right. And if 4 are not here, then there's no quorum. All right. That's it. No me.
Good night.
Mr. Solicitor?
That's
There's 4 physical people have to be here. 3 could be on the electronic,
I believe, sorry, President, but I believe that the
Yes,
mayor
that's
is.
what- the mayor's right. You finally spoke up. You finally spoke up.
The truth is the light.
We have to have 4 people present.
The lawyer finally speak.
I'm glad the mayor spoke up for a change.
the accounts payable.
You don't have authority to vote.
You can't vote.
You cannot continue. You do not have authority.
Why are you talking? The
You
meeting's
cannot
over.
continue. You cannot continue.
It's adjourned. It's
continue.
adjourned. It's already adjourned.
It's adjourned. You don't got a quorum on the floor.
I'm
Violation.
gonna
We
make
don't
an
need to hear
announcement
you.
here. I'm gonna make an announcement here.
Here, tell us something. I don't want to hear it.
For councilors to get
No
up
announcement
and
from me.
walk out and
How?
not conduct the business of the borough.
They are. They're protecting the borough from lawsuits. They're protecting the borough from $3 million lawsuits. No, this is not a meeting. There is no longer any order. There is no order. The meeting
This is a social
adjourned.
gathering
This is a social gathering.
That's right.
This is a social gathering.
with no official character.
It ain't no meeting now.
That's the borough manager. That's the borough manager. Mr. Borough Manager, you may be right, this is not a meeting, but I will caution you as a borough manager that your point about Mr. Yeadon, that's a discussion. But insofar as our ability to pay the bills, by not having this count.
Then maybe you need to get your supporters to come to the
Our
meeting.
inability to have this meeting
That's
tonight
the
means
last
that
time. Elliot doesn't come.
our inability to have this meeting tonight means that our vendors who we do business with will not be paid.
Maybe you need to stop trying to embezzle.
Don't use your vendors as a shield. You should
It
have
is
thought of this
the
first.
vendors are not a shield. It's law, it is rules by which we govern by.
Paying Gary Court a
It's the
shit
conduct
post
of the borough.
on
It's not
Facebook
individuals.
at our cost of $6,500 a month for him to shit post on Facebook. It's a personal expense of Sharon. Paying him when he's performing unethically and not doing his job is embezzlement.
Meeting's over. Let's go.
Over.
Goodbye.
Boy, this is the shortest meeting I've ever been.
Hey, buddy. Hang in there.
Good night, Mayor. Have a good
It's like, for this, you know.